So I've been intrigued by looking at what Russia has said about the missile attack in Kyiv yesterday and how what they said has changed over time in just the span of about 24, maybe 30 hours. So in this video, we're going to look at what Russia media said about the attack yesterday, how it shifted today, and we're going to look at RT and Pravda. Actually, we'll look at Pravda first, then we'll look at RT, and then we'll look at what was said yesterday in a video. And now I want you to look at consistency, because when people are not consistent, that's usually a sign of something, right? So if they're inconsistent, that usually means something is wrong. If they're consistent, that doesn't mean that it's actually right. It just means that it's consistent, but at least it's not necessarily wrong, where inconsistency usually shows that they're wrong. Now, they'll say things like, this didn't happen, or that happened. Now, if they're saying that this, whatever the it is, happened, and then you see international media reporting on the same thing, verifiably saying that this actually happened, and they're saying, no, 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 it didn't happen, or it didn't happen this way. Who are you going to believe, Russian media or international media? And so that's a good question in and of itself. And then couple that with the idea that Russia has a track record of lying. Like, think about Bucha, same kind of scenario, all these atrocities, international reporters on the ground seeing what happened, and the Russians are saying, no, 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 it didn't happen. See how this finger twitched its actors, or that kind of thing. Now, you're going to see and hear what they said for yourself, and then you're going to ask yourself some questions. So does it pass the sniff test? That's the first thing. Does this even make sense that what they're saying is accurate? And then the second question is, why are they saying what they're saying? Because they're saying what they're saying to an audience for a reason. What are they now? And if what they're saying is actually full of contradictions, then what's the point of that? Because they could get their story straight and just stick with one particular story. But if they're okay with having multiple contradictions between their official stories, then why are they okay with that? And what's the goal here? Okay, with that, let's go and look at first Pravda, then RT, and then after that, we're going to look at this little bit RT video on Rumble. This is Pravda.ru, Russian state media. Russia strikes Kyiv bunkers, annihilating Ukraine and NATO top security officials. You have children who are top security officials in Ukraine because you hit a children's hospital. Okay, Russia's forces hit an inconspicuous building near the children's hospital in Ukraine. Okay, so that's what they're saying. It's really that they had the security meeting right next door to the hospital, and so they hit that, and, you know, as a side effect. The decision-making center of the Ukrainian security forces were located there. In Kyiv, targets were hit. Underground bunkers of the Otterum aviation plant in the city center were destroyed. Russian sources suggest that NATO high-ranking specialists and the operational leadership of the Ukrainian armed forces were staying in the plant bunkers at the moment of the attack. So they're just fabricating something out of whole cloth. Moreover, the positions of a U.S. Patriot air defense system were also hit in the July 8th attack. There's nothing in the news about that. I was looking for it. And if you find it, please put it in the comments below. I'd like to actually see it. The humble building next to the children's hospital was used as a decision-making center of the armed forces of Ukraine. Quote, given the time of the strike, Monday morning, a meeting of important people was most likely taking place there, unquote. Okay, again, manufactured out of whole cloth. The Ukrainian administration immediately ordered its lackeys to advertise that it was the hospital that the Russian forces struck. The purpose of the campaign is to divert attention from other missile strikes so that people do not ask the authorities why military installations were located right next to residential buildings and hospitals. Try to raise the morale of the army and the population by making them despise the enemy for striking the children's hospital, although everyone knows that it was a downed rocket. Wait a minute. Was it a strike on next to it, or was it a downed rocket? Which is, like, you've got to pick which lie you're going to be going with. Okay, distract the public attention from daily lawlessness, corruption, tariff increases, rising prices, fatigue, disappointment, and the constant retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine. I thought they were talking about Russia there for a moment with that list. Add a reason to justify unlimited mobilization. Stir up another media hyper for the West before the NATO summit. And this is what's published in Pravda. You saw it with your own eyes. I'm not making this up. Okay, let's look and see what RT has to say. NATO will use Kyiv hospital tragedy to escalate the conflict. I think when you're hitting a children's hospital, you're escalating the conflict. The U.S.-led bloc, of course, it's the U.S.'s fault. The U.S.-led bloc will use the incident to justify continued arming of Ukraine, the Russian ambassador has claimed. Instead, the press and the U.S. government are whipping up hysterics, the diplomat claimed on Monday. The reality is that the incident with the destroyed hospital, which happened on the eve of a NATO summit in Washington, was apparently taken by Kyiv's backers as a perfect gift to justify their further escalation of the conflict and continuation of hostilities to the last Ukrainian. So apparently Kyiv's to blame for whipping this up to cause this so that they could get something out of NATO, but you actually fired the missile, not Ukraine. Okay, so that's where we are with that. So let's turn our attention to this video from RT that's on Rumble. And this is where you can actually see RT video. So let's watch what they said yesterday. This is about 20 hours ago, and see what they said.
Published photos and video footage from Kyiv unequivocally confirmed the destruction was due to the fall of a Ukrainian air defense rocket launched from an anti-aircraft missile system in the city.
Okay, so this was their first story, was that it was not that they tried to do it. And now remember, in the previous article, they were talking about how they were trying to hit this NATO group that was next to the hospital. But yesterday, the first thing that they said was, we weren't trying to do that. This was Ukrainian anti-aircraft that, you know, it hit the missile and then it fell down to the ground and it caused this thing.
Especially note the similar tantrums of the Kyiv regime have been happening for years, and every time on the eve of the next meeting of the patrons from NATO.
Right, because they're causing this just before the NATO summit in order to get some kind of extra measures from NATO.
Well, this was the largest strike on Kyiv by Russian forces.
It's pronounced Kyiv.
Over the summer, and perhaps the biggest this year. Certainly 40 various missiles, that is hypersonic missiles, Kinjal missiles, as well as cruise missiles, tactical missiles, targeted airfields in half a dozen Ukrainian cities, targeted military bases, targeted arms production plants, the Antonov and the Artyomov plants in Kyiv, for example, which specialize in, amongst other things, the production of...
Amongst other things. So it might have also targeted other things, but it did target a hospital. And that's what they're not admitting. And they weren't willing to admit this yesterday in the video. I'll let you play another 30 seconds or so you can see him not talk about the hospital.
Air-to-air missiles, as well as repairing Western donated weapons to Ukraine. Vehicles, for example, tanks, armored personnel carriers, infantry, fighting vehicles. The Ukrainian side also says that several substations were hit in Kyiv. Unclear whether that was debris or whether that was by missiles. Ukraine has already come out and claimed that it shot down about 70% of the missiles launched by Russia, which is evidently untrue. There has been...
Okay, so we're going to stop there. He's going to show some video that I can't really put onto YouTube, and I'm trying to appease the YouTube censor gods here. And so, but why would he... Now, let's back up and think about this. Russian state media is coordinated, and Russian state media puts out this, and then they put out what I read you, and they seem to be okay with the contradictions. But why? I think it's because they're not trying to paint a particular picture of that's wrong, this is right, but trying to confuse. And that's what Russian state media does, in my estimation, most of the time. You tell me what you think. I'm curious. Put that in the comments below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.